let's do it. We got a big lineup today. And again, this is like sort of a live recording of something that a lot of people also watch asynchronously. But we've got a lot of stuff. So, as I guess I'll say, and then Andrew, you can grab the mic too. If this is your first Loot Town Square, here's where we are and what this is. This is a show and tell for builders across the Lootverse. This is a launch pad and a brainstorming opportunity for loot ideas. This is, in some ways, an all-hands for our Lootverse extended community. And in some other ways, this has also become sort of an all-hands for the Hyperverse. Decentralized, permissionless, composable, on-chain projects, even beyond loot. A lot of us work on many different things at the same time. As Dom says, we all contain multitudes. And I think this call has become a really interesting combination of people from around the world and around projects who are all just thinking about things differently and thinking about things in a collective way that's moving this NFT space, this Web3 space, and this Hyperverse forward. Really cool to see what everybody's been working on, both within the Lootverse and without, or outside of Lootverse. But today I think we have such a big lineup of Lootverse stuff that today's call will probably be almost entirely Lootverse stuff. If we get to the end and we're still flowing, anybody who's working on something, feel free to raise their hand, unmute, share, grab the microphone, grab the screen share, and go for it. But for today, we're going to cover the crypt, we're going to cover Hyperloot, we're going to cover the Realms update plus the Lootverse Atlas. We're going to cover the official launch of Loot Foundation. We're going to release and discuss the loot stats, greatness level ratings stuff. We're going to talk about Genesis Project and some Lost Mana naming and the Genesis Portal and GA naming and some more. We're going to hear from Loot for Loot, L-U-T-E for Loot. We're going to touch on some LootDAO admin stuff and the voting and the quorum stuff that happened this week. I think we might get a preview of Helms for Loot. And if we have time, we're also going to quickly touch on the Genesis Scrolls project. So that is a lot. We often say, we'll cut this at 60 minutes, and we never hold to that, but let's give it a try again. Andrew, I know this week you were out in the wild doing loot in real life. Give us your life update.
Yeah, I was out in the wilds of New York City with the I don't see anyone on here from the Loot LARP team, but we were scouting locations for their upcoming LARP event at NFT NYC in June. And so I don't have too much to share, and I don't want to step on their toes, but I would say, if you're interested in LARPing or digi-physical weapons or going on quests with other loot adventures around New York City, I would mark your calendars for NFT NYC. It's going to be a pretty amazing experience. So, but I'll let that team kind of announce that when the time is right for them. But other than that, this is Loot Town Square number 14. Pretty amazing. Excited to be here. I think we have a lot on the lineup, but I think quite a few of them are just sort of updates, so we can kind of move through the updates pretty quickly. Let's see. I don't have anything else to say. I think maybe we'll start with the crypt.
Hello. I guess that's.
I like it. That's you.
Hello. It is. Okay. I'll try and get through quickly because that is a really long lineup. Just share my screen.
No need to rush, though. I know you guys have some exciting stuff you want to share, so don't rush through it. Like Andrew said, some of the other ones are going to be more just quick, posters and postings about what's going on here. But feel free to dive in at whatever level of detail you want.
All right. Okay. It's not too detailed, so let's just go. Can you see my screen?
I see it.
1 second. Okay. So you see the presentation, right? Just checking. I've got a couple of screens here.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. So yeah, it's really good to be back here at the town square. The last time that we were here talking, I think it was just after the dungeons in Chapter 1 had all been raided. So we were really like riding that high and trying to take it all in. So today I'm here to talk about our second chapter of the Crypt. But before I dive straight into Chapter 1, I just wanted to give a bit of context in case there's anyone here who haven't been following us and don't know anything about Chapter 1 or the Crypt. So first I'll just talk about the Crypt, and I want to touch upon our kind of high-level plan. So Chapter 1, as you might know, was released last month. And then Chapter 2, what I'm here to talk about today, it's being released tomorrow. So we intend to continue these releases roughly on a monthly basis, depending on the scope. And we're kind of seeing these chapters as a part 1 in the bigger picture. So we're calling it the raids at the moment. That might change. But the raids are really a chance for anyone who wants to kind of be a part of our project and get involved like at a really early stage by raiding the dungeons and winning our relics in what we hope is like a really fun, interactive and collaborative kind of way. And then at the same time, it's allowing us to kind of learn and grow as a team. Some of us weren't in this world before. We're all game development background. So yeah, that's kind of our thinking here. And then we have this part 2, which we haven't really talked about publicly that much, but it's really what we set out to do initially as game developers. Was we always had this vision of a bigger game. And we have started work on this in the background. We're making so much progress, but the design of it isn't like fully concrete yet. So it's not. I don't really want to go into the details because those are all probably going to change. But it just felt important to give context as to where Chapter 2 fits and where the chapters fit, I guess, in the bigger picture. And it would have just felt a bit weird leaving it out since it's a big part of what's going on behind the scenes. And it also feels relevant to the chapters because it's where we intend on providing the relics with some utility, whether that be via token drops or early access or in the game itself. And those things are still things we're discussing, which is partly why we don't want to make any, hard promises, but we know for sure that we want them to have utility there. So that's all I've got to say really on the high level vision of the Crypt. And now I'm going to get into the more nitty gritty stuff of the chapters. So just starting off with a recap on Chapter 1. If you played along and you raided, you'll know that Chapter 1 was made up of 16 dungeons for loot holders to raid. Each dungeon was set up very much like loot in that there were these 8 attributes, and depending on the loot bag's affinity with those attributes would depend on how many hit points you'd score. So you would need many loot bags to defeat the whole dungeon, and the whole aim was to defeat the dungeon and leave with the relics in hand. So there was a bit of an interesting dynamic in the way that the relics were rewarded, which was that the first dungeons to be defeated would get the rarest relics. So as a result of this, it kind of played out in that it was a bit of a race to raid as quickly as possible. And in the end, all the dungeons ended up being fully raided in under 15 minutes, which isn't what we'd anticipated. We were worried that nobody would raid, or we thought it would take, at least a day, if not weeks. So, yeah, we were watching all of this happen live. It was amazing to see and super encouraging. And also, what was even more amazing was hearing afterwards how people had formed the raiding parties beforehand and really made a strategy. So yeah, it turned out a lot better than we could have really imagined. On the flip side, it's a bit of a double-edged sword how quickly they got raided, because we did have some people who were still in bed during the raid who would have loved to take part, and they just couldn't because it happened too quickly. So that was kind of one of the learnings we wanted to take from Chapter 1 and into Chapter 2. So yeah, that takes me on to Chapter 2. So there's two kind of big things really that we wanted to do with Chapter 2, bearing in mind that we wanted to get it out quite quickly, within a month, so we didn't have room for too much scope. But we always envisioned that we firstly wanted to widen the net of people who could raid. And it felt kind of natural for this next group of raiders to be more loot holders, given that more loot is set up in the same way as loot, and so we could reuse the same scoring system. We did consider opening it up to both OG loot holders and more loot holders, but it felt kind of like if we were to do that, then we should do something more interesting with the scoring. In that loot is rarer, so it's more valuable. So it wouldn't have felt right to have the same scoring for the loot as the more loot. So in the end, we just went with more loot for this one. It's something that we're really considering for the future chapters, though, like bringing back loot into the raids, as well as opening up to other types of loot, like Genesis, Adventurers. I was talking to Tim Shell about this earlier. So yeah, that was our first goal. And then the second was, as I was saying, to try and make sure that the dungeons stay open for longer than 15 minutes. So one way of doing this is kind of obvious, just more hit points, which we need to do anyway, just because of the difference in scale of M loot to loot. But we've increased this by a bigger factor than just the ratio of M loot to loot. And then the second part is, instead of being able to just continually raid with your wallet, because there are some M loot whales who maybe have, I think the biggest holder has 1,500. We want to avoid the situation that one person just raids all of the dungeons. So we've put a small ETH charge in there's one free raid per day, and then any subsequent raids, there's a small ETH charge. Not sure if this will actually mitigate people raiding over and over again, but it's also, I guess, a bit of an experiment as well. And other than that, the more loot dungeons work in pretty much the same way as the loot dungeons. It's got the same scoring system. So if you took part in Chapter 1, then you'll know. If you didn't, then there's information in our white paper on exactly how the scoring system works, and you can always ask us in our Discord channels. We're happy to help if it doesn't make sense. And that's really all there is to say on Chapter 2, apart from how you should take part. So it's going live tomorrow, but they're not going to be raidable until next Thursday, March the 10th at 3 p.m. UTC time, which I think is 7 a.m. PT time. So that means you've got a week to have a look at the dungeons, see which ones you can raid with your M loot, maybe gather clans, and give yourself a head start. And yeah, I'm going to end it by showing our trailer, our teaser trailer, and then we can have any questions if anyone's got any. And I think we've got Sportsbeard here as well, who's our CTO, for any more technical questions. So hopefully this will work. Cool. Yeah, so that's it.
Awesome, Bucket. Thank you for sharing. Really cool. And you mentioned that there's some secret groups who are coordinating in the background. No comment.
Secret groups, did I?
Some groups who are coordinating their raids in the background. Some guilds or whatever you want to call them. Raiding parties.
Well, I don't know. I'm encouraging this.
Yes.
I don't know that there is any, but I highly encourage this.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Even for myself, no comment. I don't know.
Okay.
Great work. Great work, Sports Beard. And Demore, I don't think you're on here, but great work to y'all. Cool, thank you. Next, we're going to talk about Hyper Loot. I'm looking down the list here to see if anyone from the crew is on. I know the time frame might be tough.
I don't see anyone.
No. I'll do a quick screen share then. Here's to share for Hyper Loot's sake. Here we go. I presume everyone has seen Hyperloot so far, but if not, this is the amazing beauty of Hyperloot here. If you're just listening to this call, go to twitter.com/hyperloot_. We need to do a raid for the Hyperloot handle. I wonder who's on the actual Hyperloot handle. But these are beautiful. These are layered. They're full CCO, full 2D, 3D, open source, all the Photoshop files, all the renderings, all the vector files, all the layers. Hyperloot talks about it as a layer 2 for Loot, like the next layer of fidelity for Loot, but still fully composable and open source and CCO, which is just incredible. The launch, I think, was supposed to be tomorrow, but they wanted to get it right, and so I think they pushed it back about a week. But it looks like the new mint date is March 7th, so 5 days from now, 11 a.m. Eastern time. So yeah, about exactly five days from right now. And I don't want to get it wrong, so I'll let you do your own research, but I want to say that the first release is mintable with a Genesis loot bag or an OG loot bag and a small whitelist, and then I think the next day, 24 hours later, I think it's open to anyone with M-Loot, plus GA and an OG as well. I don't know if anyone wants to corroborate that. They have some really cool ideas too. This is just a concept, but they're also thinking about composable CCO games that combine loot with other stuff, and you can just look at this and see what's going on here. This is fully concept art, but oh my god, I'm just going to pause on the screen for a second because this is just incredible. I'll post this link to the Discord too, so you can check it out.
Okay, I'm going to confirm for you, Tim Shell. The pre-sale is for OG, GAs, and the hyper list. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like a allow list.
Yeah.
And then the public sale is for OG loot, G loot, and M loot the following day.
Sweet. Really excited for this. And similar to the crypt, I know that people are working in the backgrounds preparing and coordinating and getting ready. I know I've been preparing and coordinating and getting ready to make sure that all of my Genesis loot bags are ready to go and that my single best M loot bag is ready to go. So I'm excited for this. It looks beautiful. And we talk about loot being sort of a movement from low fidelity to high fidelity in lots of ways. From low fidelity to high fidelity in art, in interactivity, in playability, in community, and even in story. And this one is just a perfect metaphor for that this just brings loot to life in such an awesome way. Super excited to hear where the lore of this goes to. Obviously, the visuals here are super unique compared to what we've seen in loot so far. And so just thinking more about, like, when is this? Is this the future? Is this the long past? Is this a parallel universe? But really excited to learn more about this as we go. But just wanted to shout that out. Launches 5 days from now. And this should be a really exciting moment for the Lootverse. Cool. Number 3, wanted to shout out to the Lootverse Atlas, plus also just shout outs to the Realms Biblio team. Who do I see here? I can speak to it, but you guys get a lot of my voice. Grug, if you wanted to take the lead, you could talk about the Atlas plus even Grug's lair. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you are one of the leaders in the Realms community.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi there. Yeah, well, obviously, like, development side, I've got really not much to do with the rest of the team, but yeah, definitely, like, they've been like smashing, like, and doing like an amazing job with the Atlas, and like finally you can see some very detailed and not 2D SVG maps of your rounds, and I'm very like excited to actually like see this coming to life. It's kind of like a dream really becoming reality. And yeah, I'm literally like every day talking with Love, making sure that just asking like how the dev is going, and they're making like a really an impressive progress really on basically like all the fronts, also because they're implementing crypting caverns and rounds, the mini game. There is like so much going on as well. Actually, like I just got back from the gym earlier, and I saw your announcement, like, oh, the loot post town is on, and usually like it's during the evening, and I was like, oh, this is like much earlier than usually. But yeah, definitely like the Atlas has been. I think like got many people excited really, and obviously like it kind of set the next stage for the breach into Starknet. I think most of the people online have been hopefully have been keeping track with the latest announcement that actually we've got 2 more contracts going on for the staking. One is the Galleon, which is pretty much like the same as before. The token emission has been reduced because obviously like we basically in preparation for the breach to start into Starknet. And then the other one is the Karak, I think it's called, and that's basically like the only difference is it doesn't have any bonus Lords token generated every week, but then you will be able to claim it every week as before. Whether like with the Galleon, they will just be available on I think after the full 5 weeks when we are gonna go on Starknet. Yeah, if I can say something about the Grudge layer, obviously like it's not fully related to the loot kind of like ecosystem, but obviously like we are heavily kind of resorting on the fact that we have been basically like we're focusing the Grudge layer to be a plate where guild and a DAO, which obviously like is still in the progress, as probably like Tim has shown. Now it's showing the website. We launched on Saturday. We're like 4 days into the public minting process. We just go past like 60% minted, and yeah, basically like the NFTs will kind of like give you voting power in the DAO and future play-to-earn activities, and the rounds, especially rounds and all the loot verse is definitely like one of the priorities that we are gonna focus like our assets and guilds, basically. Also because myself and the rest of the lords as well are pretty much interested into joining forces, and there is maybe like finally get this like a huge battle between the dark side and the light side. That would be like an amazing cooperative effort to watch, especially like I think it will be what basically like everyone is looking forward as Realms is coming along as a basically like a strategy game fully on chain. So that's thank you for the spotlight, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And for people who didn't understand the context, Greg is one of the community leaders within the Realms ecosystem, from like almost the very beginning. I know, Greg, you and me met like all the way back in September, October, as we were building the first bridge between Genesis Project and Realms, back when we did that first 8-time season where we discovered this natural resource across the realms, and the first claimers of that were the Realms ecosystem. And so I've just been impressed with Greg from the beginning, and so I wanted to be able to spotlight both, obviously, what Biblio and Realms is doing, but awesome to see you building a community that's both Lootverse and beyond.
Yeah, thank you. I think like the main goal of the Grug Slayer is basically like kind of I think personally like I'm very like focused on like this trend about like bladeware and gaming, like gamify gaming on the blockchain. I'm very bullish on it, and I think like the major barrier for like people is really to the actual like cost of some assets. So ideally, the Grug Slayer is basically like focusing on reducing the cost of the assets. Basically, like there is actually no cost, and then the owner can actually like receive a reward from the effort that basically like whoever is gonna borrow the assets. So this sort of like scholarship will facilitate just like everyone to actually like be on board, because obviously like I think this has been seen for the first time with Axie when I was just like I really like the idea at the beginning. Then obviously like things go like really overheated, and then obviously like you see you actually ask yourself how can people actually like pay $1,000, $2,000 just to make a team actually play the game. So this is where like the Grug Slayer is coming across, like trying to solve this problem, and we've got like a bunch of like news coming soon in probably like in the next 2 weeks. For now we're focusing on getting some more info out, also because we're kind of like the idea is to be a kind of niche closed kind of like private group where obviously like we want to give the advantages and benefits to the owner of the NFTs and share like alphas and obviously like the bladeware guild, there will be like airdrops. We're actually like just defining the token economics. Hopefully they will be ready by the end of the week. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool, thank you so much, Greg. And along the way, I've been just demoing the Lootverse Atlas, that every time I look at this, I realize there's so much here.
Yeah, there's so much.
And one thing I can share here on behalf of Lord of a Few and the rest of the team, and I guess myself too, I'm definitely involved here in helping steer and drive and build this, is that this Atlas isn't just a Realms Atlas, this is a Lootverse Atlas. So this will be an Atlas that starts to come to life with, already it's got Realms, already it's got crypts and caverns. I could definitely imagine the crypt that Lockett just shared finding a place in the Lootverse Atlas, figuring out where are these crypts, where did they come from, where are they hidden. We've got the orders on here, and each of the orders represents an area on this map. So let me scroll out here. Order of Giants, Order of Power, Order of Brilliance, each have their own kind of continental or country areas. So the orders live here with a bunch of interesting information about what the orders are, plus the wonders of the order, plus some of the notable Genesis adventures of those orders. We could see this having a timeline. We talked about this having maybe like a weather report timeline where you can almost scroll into the past to say like, what were the realms like during the Genesis era? Scroll into the middle. What were the realms like during the Age of Adventure? What were the realms like during the Mist? What were the realms like today and in the future? And maybe fast forward, what were the realms like in Hyperloot's future? So there's definitely something here in terms of another axis around time. But the short-term thing that we're going to start to see here is an explosion of more points of interest and the beginnings of lore. Boogie, I'm going to mute you, but unmute if you want. The beginnings of some lore here. So first, we're going to start to see the bags show up on the actual map. So right now we have Crypts and Caverns and we have Realms. But we're going to start to see the 8,000 OG loot bags, the 2,500 Genesis loot bags actually mapped onto the map. And then the ability for people to write their own stories, to name their own characters, their own bags, to write stories that cut across different places and different points of interest and different locations and different Genesis adventures and different OG loot bags. And so you'll start to see actually this come to life not only with visual treatments, more interactive realms, more 3D realms, more interactive everything, but also coming to life with stories. So if that's exciting to you, pop into the Realms Discord. There's a lot of discussion about the mechanics of how that's going to work, plus also just like the creation of that content is going to be a community initiative. I think there's probably already like 15,000 points of interest on this map. When you add the loot bags and the Genesis adventures, which is another 10,000, there's probably going to be 25,000 individual points of interest mapped onto this map here. I don't see Dham on the call, but Dham is the master of maps in the Biblio world. He's doing some incredible work here, super nuanced work, to just get this all to fit. A huge puzzle. We're talking about mega world building, but a huge puzzle where it all just fits together. Like all the places on this map at the macro scale, and zoom to the micro. You could almost imagine like the farther you zoom in, maybe all of a sudden you found a secret door, and inside that secret door, there's a story or a game or an item to pick up. So just thinking about the future, this ends up being a really powerful organizing principle for the wider Lootverse. And so thanks to the team who's been building this, and keep an eye out. This is only going to get better and better. I see Ira's here, if you want to speak to this from the Crypts and Caverns perspective, or anybody else who wanted to just shout out to the Realms, Biblio, Lootverse, Atlas side of the world. Going once, going twice. Okay. Alright, let's change gears then. What did I have next on the list? Loot Foundation. Last call, I presented a sort of an alpha version of Loot.Foundation, but it hadn't fully launched yet. So I just wanted to shout out to everybody that Loot.Foundation is live. This was an insane labor of love from myself and Loot Hero and Andrew and Conway and a number of other folks across the Lootverse who participated in helping bring this to life. If you want to help here, this is a Git book, and so you can submit merge requests to it, and people already are submitting merge requests to it. But this is deep. Maybe I'll send the Twitter thread too. This is a deep site full of a ton of content, and the overarching idea is that for any builder or writer or artist or storyteller or creative person or even just community member who wants to help build this cohesive Lootverse, not just stuff that happens to be inspired by the fantasy words on the loot bags, but really a cohesive Lootverse that comes from the canonical foundation of the Loot contract. Loot Foundation's a guidebook, and from Loot Foundation, we believe we can build this infinitely expansive universe that's also still cohesive. A set of shared physics, some core principles, a core timeline, and then room for everything to just expand up and on top of that. We call this an LDK, which is a phrase that Loot Hero invented. LDK meaning Lore Development Kit. And if you Google for Lore Development Kit like 5 days ago or a week ago, no one in the history of Google had ever said those three words together until Loot Hero coined it. So I'm excited to work on the rough edges of concepts like this, concepts that haven't really been done before. Obviously, world building has been done through Wikipedia-type sites and world building. This is the first ever lore development kit. So in here you'll see some of the foundations for just like, what is loot, what is OG loot, what is more loot, etc. What is the Lootverse, this interconnected set of projects built on top of Loot's foundation. And then you'll see it kind of like two or three levels, we're calling it. Level 1 are the canonical principles, simply just like, how does a loot bag work? What are the foundational principles from the contract about how an actual loot bag works? Through to some classifications and rating systems that really do come from the core loot contract, character classes and specialties and item levels, and you just realize that the loot contract itself is rich with information. And so Loot Foundation surfaces that up the orders, the prefixes, some of the stuff that Lockett and Onusel and others discovered early on with respect to the lost names and lore ABC. So already I'm just showing that there's a ton here, and I'm still at level 0. I'm still in foundational canon from the loot contract. There's also foundational canon inside the realms contract, the resources, the wonders, and more. There's foundational lore inside the Crypts and Caverns contract with affinities and rulers and legendary. And so that's level 0. And then level 1 of this starts to pull meaning up and out of this. Level 1, like answering just basic questions like, what is loot? What is an adventurer? Where did loot come from? Who are we in the context of loot? And even some basic stuff around like the story of loot. Here, the story of the Lootverse is this story of discovery and revelation and teamwork and building and adventures. It's a story of decentralized action and collaborative world building, meaning that this story is happening not only in the meta, which is what we're literally doing on this phone call right now every week, but it's also happening in the micro of like these characters and the games, and the story of loot itself matches the meta story of what we as builders and community members are doing along the way. So if you dive in here, you'll see a lot. There's probably too much in here, but we're doing our best to try to synthesize it up. One of my favorite pages in this is this Cycles of Loot page. I'll pop this one into general. This Cycles of Loot page attempts to present a level 1 timeline. Analysis and enough teasing out of information and enough understanding of how the system works, how greatness works, and how orders work, and how prefixes work, and more. I actually have come to believe that there's an implied timeline that's right there in plain sight inside the OG contract. And that timeline splits into these 5 eras that we're calling it. This before Genesis, this Genesis era, the earliest known history of loot, the Age of Exploration, which is just the whole expansive past. It could have been 10,000 years. This interlude period, which is the Mist, which is the sort of all quiet across the realms when we showed up on August 28th or August 27th and found the 8,000 OG loot bags scattered across the realms, and we're entering the Age of Adventure, which is the present day and the future. So there's a pretty broad timeline. While it sounds maybe specific, it's pretty broad and open-ended to anybody to build inside this timeline. But my belief is that with just enough constraint and just enough canonical foundation for the timeline, we can build this cohesive lootverse together. We've also built this into a visual timeline, so if you really want to get geeky in here, there's a Figma, and you can dive into the Figma and really make sense of it. But it's a timeline that makes sense of, like, how did loot bags come to be? Where did loot bags get found? How did Genesis loot come to be? Where did OG loot come from? What are these bags that we found after this cataclysmic event? And obviously, like, where are we going in the future, which is all the different projects being built on it. But it really takes the concept of greatness to heart, and it uses greatness as an organizing principle for time, and an organizing principle for age and experience across the lootverse. I have to just call out that while you may think of me as one of the foremost experts in loot canon, the real expert behind a lot of this is Loot Hero. I see you're on the call, so if you want to jump in, please do. But you are both a sung hero, because I think everybody in the Lootverse is incredible, but also sometimes an unsung hero. And so I want to just take a moment to acknowledge you. A lot of this lore development kit has come out of your brain and your deep, deep understanding of the loot contract and how the mechanics in that contract manifest out into lore and stories and meaning. Mike to Loot Hero, if you want to say hi.
Hey, thanks, Tim Shell. Yeah, happy to be here. Happy to be working with so many talented people. Yeah, it takes us all to really build this entire world, as is evident by just all the projects that are even listed on your screen now, or that whole right side of where we are now. So it's just, there's so many of us, and it's, I'm honored to be one of the contributors.
Dig it. Okay, so we talked level 0 and level 1. Level 1 being the interpretation of some of these canonical principles, like greatness is in the contract. What is greatness? Names are in the contract. What do those mean? Orders are in the contract. What do those mean? That's level 1, and it's open for some more interpretation, but for anybody who's building in the Lootverse, we would at least request that you read it and understand it, and then either build on top of it, or fork away from it, or even better, just improve it. So if you see something here where you say, you know what, my conception of the Lootverse is a little bit different, let's work together to make our foundational canon as strong as possible for this infinitely expansive future ahead of us. And that's level 1. Level 2 is this idea of higher fidelity canon on top of that. So some examples of that would be like the 16 orders. Clearly in the contract there are 16 orders, but not in the contract. There are no themes, there are no stats, there's no narrative descriptions of these orders, but it's probably helpful for us as a community if we have like a general concept of what these orders might mean. And so this is a community-crafted example of like level 2 lore, where we can say things like the Order of Power is about confidence, the Order of Enlightenment is about wisdom, the Order of Fury is about destruction, and obviously these are way open-ended concepts, but as you're building stories, projects, games, derivatives, etc., you can think about these as maybe some launching off points, some story seeds, and some light constraints that hopefully provide some creativity. Even further here, we have some like deeper descriptions of like what are these orders, and even down to the level of like within the Order of Power, here's its summary, here are its wonders, here are its Genesis adventures, here are the realms, and even down to the level of like what are the beliefs and the industry and the design language and the values of these orders. We as a community are going to start to build these in and fill these in as a group. Plus there's also some story seeds, there's some places, like one of the first crypt Dungeon of the Twins, in one of our stories we said it's in a specific realm, for example, or the Divine City exists, and where does it exist, and what is it, and this ends up being a jumping off point also to other stories and other story seeds and other places in the Lootverse that can come to life. That was much longer and much more detailed than I expected to describe this, but really excited for it. And I just want to reiterate again, this is open, and it's a collaborative Git book, and so there's even a list here of like stuff people can do to help. A lot of it can be like UI and visuals and more content. We've done our best with our abilities, but this is an open-ended thing that we'd love everybody to be part of. Cool, that was Loot Foundation. One thing that I wanted to then tease out of Loot Foundation and Sportsbeard, you're still here, right? I want to talk Loot Stats. And Treppers is on, actually. Let me do a 10-second intro, and then Treppers and Sportsbeard, I would love if you guys could share this. The 10-second intro is that inside the OG Loot contract, there are a set of canonical stats that if you just look close enough, are right there hiding in plain sight. And not dexterity, magic, intelligence, offense, defense. Those stats are not in the contract. But there are 3 stats, and I guess actually 4, that truly are in the contract. There's a greatness score. There are item levels. There is an implied rating, and that implied rating is simply the levels times the greatness, which gets you to a score that goes from magically 0 to 100. And there are also specialties, or sometimes we call them character classes, and that's all inside the OG Loot contract, right in plain sight, hidden on chain. To tease that out, Treppers and I and Sportsbeard and Loot Hero and some others have been working on a public goods contract for the Lootverse to help everybody who's building on loot make sense of that and pull those stats from any loot bag. And so maybe with that, Treppers or Sportsbeard, maybe Trepper, since you just pushed the last version, do you want to speak to that loot stats contract and where to find it, and maybe just some basics on how to use it?
Sure, I'm out. I'm currently out. But yeah, so the loot stats is, I don't know if you can throw up, I think Tim Shell retweeted it by tweet at some point, but it's up on the Genesis project GitHub, and it is a utility contract that anyone can basically implement into their own project, and there's 2 sets of functions. There's a couple sets of functions to get the greatness level and rating kind of stats. You can get both on the token ID as well as on individual items, and it works with loot mLoot and Genesis Ventures, and it extends the loot classification utility contract, which the Crypt team built out. So it's kind of a community co-developed project, open source project here, and it's open for everyone to use and to upgrade and to add as needed.
Our plans for this too are to essentially, or eventually, send this to the Loot DAO itself. Once we have a Loot DAO that has some organization and people who can control multisig and more, our goal is to actually take this contract itself and send the keys to the Loot DAO and have the Loot DAO be the owner and the shepherd of this going forward. But in the meantime, it's open source. It's here on GitHub, like Treppers is saying. Sports Beard, if you want to hop in, I know you did the first rev of this. Any comments or follow-ups?
Yeah, sure. It's so as Treppers is saying, loot stats is actually crawling into the loot classification, which is some of the kind of more the underlying classification of loot. It's got like an enumeration of what the different classes are, with the warrior and hunter and mage and that kind of thing in. And what Treppers did was he extended that, he added greatness to that, and then added this loot stats contract as well. And now they're both deployed onto Ethereum mainnet, so other community projects deploying to the blockchain can tap into them and know that they're using canonical foundational classes and stats. We had an interesting conversation about making them upgradable. So as we discover more lore or maybe tweak the existing foundational principles or classification of things, we'd want to update these contracts. But it's kind of on the edge of like collaborative Web3 development, where if you've got a contract, say, as part of the crypt in our game that relies on a particular version of loot lore, and then it gets upgraded, you don't want that to break the game. So we kind of need this sort of API versioning of the system. So we're not quite sure the best way to do that, but at the moment, at least on the loot classification side of it, the GitHub there, so it's all open source as well. The idea is that when people extend it or change it, they can deploy it to mainnet and then publish the address of the deployed contract. And then if people are using it, they can decide which they can use the latest version, and then if it gets updated, they can decide whether or not to upgrade it. So it's not kind of upgradable in the true sense, but by making it an open source deployed thing with a central table of deployments, then in effect it becomes an upgradable thing. So we can have versions in the future, and both of them can be owned by a Divine DAO in the future.
This is really cool. What's on the screen here is a really nice visual manifestation of this too. What I'm looking at right now is specifically a Genesis loot bag, but I want to call out that these stats, these levels here, greatness level, rating, and then number of hunter, number of mage, number of items, this is being called directly from that contract. So we can pull this for any mLoot ID, for any OG loot ID, and any Genesis loot ID, which allows us to build all sorts of derivatives and visualizations and UIs and leaderboards and stuff on top of this, plus anybody who's building anything, whether it's helms for loot or rings for loot or loot for loot or anything. These stats exist, and you don't have to use them, but these stats are right inside the original loot contract and now teased out in a way that they're much more accessible for a developer to add.
The one thing I'll add if you're going to use these utility contracts is to make sure you make the address to call these contracts a settable variable so that it can be upgradable. So essentially, when a new version is released, you can just switch, and then you verify it's not breaking the existing code. You can just switch the contract out to the new contract, the new utility contract, and it'll work. So it's kind of a poor man's upgrading / versioning, but I think it works, and it's probably the easiest way forward for the community.
Yeah, good point.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that, guys. And this is really amazing. This is definitely sort of in the public goods for loot and the loot-verse category. But seeing it come to life is amazing. And one place that has come to life, and I'm going to transition over to Genesis Project, is that we have built a leaderboard for the Genesis Project that gives a lot more order and structure to something that a lot of us have been doing manually in Excel tables and on sticky notes, that has now been brought right up to the surface. And so what we've done is been able to use the greatness level and rating scores to be able to take all the Genesis loot bags that have been built so far, and all the ones in the future, and put them into a UI so that we can essentially create like a, quote, leaderboard. And this leaderboard doesn't have to just be about rating, it can also be about greatness, because greatness maybe speaks to the stories held by these items and the age and experience of the items, but it can also be sorted by level, which is, this bag, for example, may not scream at you as like a number one bag, but it's 36 out of 36 on the level, meaning that every single item here is a top level item. So level more about like strength and power and abilities of the items. And then rating combines those two. And I don't think I see Foul Plane on the call here, but congrats to Foul Plane with the only fully perfect top-rated Genesis loot bag in the history of mankind here at the top of the list. It's the first, and honestly it may be the last, but awesome to see this here. I see Secretive at number 3, Sneak Attack all the way up to number 3. Lord Secretive has been a source of energy and excitement across the Lootverse lately, and so this is great to see you here. But just, again, trying to bring this to life, and bring the canonical foundational facts from loot all the way up to life through all of our different projects. One thing that we're going to probably do with this, or that I would like to do with this, is to take this concept of a, quote, leaderboard, or maybe like a compendium of bags, and level it up all the way to just lootproject.com. I could imagine a lootproject.com first tab that actually says, like, bags, explore the bags, or something like that. And then from those bags, you could see this leaderboard, and we need a little bit more UI tweaks to make this work at the loot, M-loot, and Genesis loot combination level. But that would be pretty incredible. And you could also even see, like, unminted M-loot bags would be pretty cool. I know, Yoshi, you had mentioned messing around with that, and it's probably not that hard now that we have the contract out and the ability to work on it through Peter Watts' API. I don't know if you wanted to say hi, Yoshi, but if there's anybody who might be called in the Lootverse to do this, seems like you might be a good one, given the work you've done in Floor Finder.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited about that. Just got to find some time to make some progress.
Well, every Genesis adventure comes with 20,000 tokens of A-time.
It's very true.
If only you could spend your A-time on real time. So yeah, we're really excited about this, and just wanted to call it out, and also congrats to the folks who are doing amazing work here. Want to call out Tenox, who's not on the call, but Tenox has been one of the devs who's driving the Genesis project forward. Just thank you to everything that you are doing here. It's really incredible. The other thing I want to call out from the Genesis project side is that just last night we launched something that the community's been waiting for quite a while that we're really excited about, which is the ability to name lost mana. For people who are in the mix, I think you know how exciting that is, and for people who don't, I'll just drop a link in the general channel. Sorry, multitasking. But the idea here is that lost mana can be used as a wild card to discover the names of the lost items inside the Genesis loot bags using some A-time, which is just a utility token. And as a result, it allows you to have a little more control of essentially building your Genesis loot bag. Genesis loot already is something you can build through trading and collaboration, but this is one more layer on top of that to finally make it complete. I had to just call this tweet out because, I don't know if Foolish Salami's on the call, but you are actually, but I just love what you said here. We launched this late last night, and you did it. I think you were maybe the first or second one. You said, damn, I feel a deep level of completeness. That was an entire journey. Just amazing to hear that. Good to hear that has stuck with people. So that's live. It's working. If you want to do that, go to the leaderboard and go to My Bags, and there'll be an upgrade button. And on that upgrade button, you'll be able to pick from a menu of all the available lost mana items. The other thing, this is not fully live yet, but is that we've added to the contract the ability to name a Genesis adventure, which I think is a pretty powerful seed for storytelling, so that if you own a GA, you can name it. Today it's through Etherscan, so it's a little bit awkward, but we're going to just put it into the DApp and make it easy. But some are already starting to be named. Like, for example, our friend Lord of a Few, who built the first full Mage of Reflection, or maybe even the first full Mage Genesis adventure, now has the official Lord of Linen here. And what's cool about this is that now not only are the property levels readable by other contracts, even this name can be read. So this name, when this Genesis bag 337 shows back up onto the Atlas, it's going to be called Lord of Linen. And beyond that, maybe it begins to have some lore and some stories and some descriptions. And from a name comes the clues and the mysteries and the history of those stories. So awesome to see that happening. So stay tuned for that. Again, it's live if you want to bang through Etherscan, but we'll integrate it into the DApp in the coming days. Treppers, any commentary on Lost Mana naming or GA naming or anything?
No, just one thing is that it to do both this is the first of an ERC20 token having utility inside the Lootverse, but we really wanted to kind of stick to what we said we were going to do with A-Time and let it do kind of things to your Genesis adventures and potentially other things moving forward. But yeah, so just be aware that when you do these things, you're going to need A-Time to do it.
Cool. I'm going to reiterate that because your audio cut out for a second there. But what Treppers is saying is that anytime you build a Genesis adventure and summon the spirits of this GA and then receive a Genesis loot bag, inside of that loot bag is a cache of 20,000 tokens of A-Time, which is a purely utility token. There's not even a publicly traded market for it. There's no liquidity pool. It's a pure Lootverse token for the ecosystem. And with that A-Time, you can now start to do stuff. And one of the things you can do with it is use it to discover the lost mana names, like reaching through times, using the power of A-Time to learn what these true names are. You can also use it to learn, again, the true name of your Genesis adventurer who once held this loot bag, and more. So just cool to see an ERC20 like that starting to take shape in a very Lootverse vibes way, as opposed to a DeFi way. We can't stop it from being a liquidity pool or from having a liquidity pool, but I kind of like that it's pure vibes today, and so we'll try to keep it that way as long as possible.
And one more thing to add to that, Tim Chill.
Yeah, please.
Just be aware, if you buy a Genesis adventure on secondary, you might want to check if the A-Time is claimed or not. So you jump into Genesis Discord for more information if that applies to you. But yeah, if you make it yourself, you're guaranteed to be able to claim it. If you buy one on secondary, it may already be claimed, so just take that into account.
Yeah, that's a good call. I was going to share this as well. If anyone's like, what the heck are you guys talking about? Portal.genesisproject.xyz is a pretty cool place to just make sense of how does a Genesis adventure fit across the Lootverse? And it shows all the different things that with the GA you can do. Like claim A-Time and discover the name is what we just said, but also visualize it and mint a Genesis Loot Explorer soon, mint Hyperloot soon, rings for loot, crystals like on the Rift, raiding crypts in Chapter 3 hopefully, and beyond, steering the project itself, finding the GAs on the Atlas, etc., etc. So hop onto here and you can make sense of it. We're at about an hour, but I kind of wanted to actually build a GA right now. I think I'm going to do it. Usually, what do you guys think? Should we do it? Live demo fails, but I kind of want to do it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can change my wallet. The reason that I wanted to do this is because A, I want to show how this works, but B, we're working right now on some really cool lore across the Lootverse that's going to tie together a bunch of bags and a bunch of realms and just introduce some of the first characters and stories to the Lootverse. And later today, there's going to be kind of like a group summoning event of a bunch of Genesis loot bags, Genesis adventurers, and the lore is going to be tied to that. And so maybe I will share this here. Nicholas yesterday summoned one of the first ones that's going to be part of the lore, and the one that I'm about to do will also be part of the lore. I think I can do this pretty quick. Loot Hero, correct me if I'm about to screw something up, because I'm also working on a powerful GA of the Fox that I don't want to break. But I think I'm doing right here. Demon, Dragon, the Lost Belt, the Demon Hide Boots for sure, the Hand Armor, the Necklace, I think, and the Lost Ring. There you go. Where's my head? And the Dragon Crown. Boom. Does that look good?
Yeah, you might want to throw that plus, or are you saving the +1 gold ring for the...
Yeah, I gotta save that +1 for my Epic Warrior.
What about the pendant?
I gotta save that for the Warrior too. That's the Rating 60 pendant.
Yeah, that one's good.
Okay, thanks for checking for me then. Alright, so I'm gonna mint this. It's only gonna take 2 seconds. At least hopefully it works. Aggressive gas. So what you're looking at right now is doing triple work. One, I guess explaining what a Genesis loot bag is. 2, I'm about to demo the Lost Mana naming, which is just super fun, sort of composable, collaborative, build on your own kind of thing. And then 3, I'm teeing us up for the summoning event later, and some of the lore that Loot Hero and the crew is launching. I think El Boogie hopped up the call, but El Boogie is the one who's been driving that and who wrote this amazing lore. Alright, approved. Boom. Summon. Gas is a little high, but that's okay. Trekkers is probably biting his fingernails right now, like, dude, why are you doing this as a live demo? Hey, it worked. Okay. Sweet. There she is. Nice. And so now, as you guys have just heard, there's some lost items in here. So what I can now do with the lost items is go to the leaderboard, find it, upgrade. I'm going to approve a time. I think that while that transaction goes, I think I can mess with these. So I can then use this to choose the items that I would like on this this GA. So I know that this has a ghost wand for reasons that you'll learn later in the lore. Gotta go with the Demon Hide Belt. Gotta go with the Demon Hands. And I think this feels right for a titanium ring. Loot Hero, what do you think?
Yeah, I think titanium works. Platinum could even work, or gold. Actually, gold would probably be my choice in this case.
Alright, I trust your judgment. Cool. Update adventure. Using just a little bit of A-time. It's free otherwise. If anyone here has ever done live demos before in presentations or on stages or for clients, you know how I feel right now. Like, is it going to actually work? But so far, so good. Okay. Give it a hard refresh. Maybe pop to here and give this guy a refresh. This does hit subgraph, I think, so it may take a minute or two to work. But let's see. Oh, look at that. It worked that fast. Boom. And there she is with the ghost wand.
¿Sabes que te reías de esto, tío? ¿Sabes que te reías de esto?
Oh, I thought somebody was going to give me some live commentary. Cool. That's all I wanted to share on that. I'm really glad that worked. And where does that put me in the leaderboard, actually? I've got a 594. Let's see. I think that should be a pretty good one. At least on the first page. Yeah, somewhere in here. Top 12. Nice. Okay.
So, can you just explain again what changed?
Yeah. So I had those lost items, and what changed is that I picked the Ghost Wand, I picked the Demon Belt, and I think I picked the Demon Hands and the Gold Ring. So I used those lost items. I reached through time. I think it cost me 500 tokens of A-time. And through time, I discovered the true names of those items that were once in those Genesis loot bags. The idea being that those Genesis loot bags, these items, over the course of generations and thousands of years were shuffled and used and lost. Some of them lost over time. And by the time we found the OG loot bags, most of these items were in those bags, but there were just a couple that were lost, a couple thousand that were lost out of the 64,000 items we did find. And I'm not going to get into the derivation of how that math worked, but there's specifically 2,167 lost items implied by the contract, at least the way that we see it. And so the lost items are our way of saying, let's find them again. And what I just did in front of us was both summon the spirit of a Genesis adventure, build its Genesis loot bag, manifest its Genesis loot bag back to the present day in my wallet, right now in the present day, both in real life but also in the Lootverse lore, and then use the A-time that I found in that Genesis loot bag to reach all the way back through time and say, okay, I want to learn the true names of these items. By learning it, I also had the power to pick those items. I did, and what you're looking at here now is a full Genesis Adventure of the Fox. It is the number 485th Genesis Adventure or Genesis Loot Bag summoned. It's the 29th of the Fox, and it has a rating of 594 out of 720. And like we talked about before, it's got levels now too. Greatness level of 135 out of 160. Item level 35 out of 36 because of my Dragon Crown is level 4 instead of level 5. And then Hunter items, it's got 5 Hunter items and 1 Mage item, which I did on purpose. I could have picked a Hunter weapon, but for reasons you'll discover later in the lore we're launching, I just picked a Mage weapon, and El Boogie's going to help bring that to life. So this is a tease of something later to come. There's going to be a bunch of Genesis Adventure summoned later today and over the course of this week that will tie together into some lore, and then that lore will get both published and also eventually pulled all the way back into this Lootverse Atlas, so that you can imagine sort of clicking through, finding the Genesis loot bags, finding the OG loot bags, finding the crypts, finding the realms that they're tied to, and essentially reading a story here that takes you through the Atlas in real time while you're also reading some high-fidelity lore. That was much longer than I expected to share, but as you can tell, I'm very excited about this. Any questions, comments, or follow-ons to anything that I just shared? Foolish, I may call on you to share your sentiments and such positive vibes. No worries if you don't want to speak. Alright, thanks everybody, this was really cool. I want to change again, and want to talk about the last thing to share, at least for today, which is loot for loot. I promised Bowtied that you'd be able to present today, and what you just shared on Twitter was super cool. And so if you want to reshare that here and talk it out, the mic is yours.
Awesome. Tim, thanks so much. These projects are all super inspiring and inspire me as a group, so I'm just excited to see all this. I should be sharing my screen now. Can you guys all see this?
Yeah, looks super cool.
Awesome. So, Loot, with a U, is a fantasy setting and story exercise kind of rooted deeply in this lore from the Loot world that Tim has been talking about. So I want to introduce this character and then kind of walk through my process of getting to here and what our next steps are. So this is Sephine. She is an ancient muse of Adrua. The muses keep the world in balance through their songs, and the story of Loot is about how song, instrument, and form are stolen from the world, right? So this connects deeply with those lost suffixes in the contract. So it's the story of how she loses her songs. So let me leap back to the beginning. I am Bowtied Indigo. I am a film composer in real life. I was originally attracted to the world of Loot to fill it with music. So I have a collection here called Loot for Adventurers that is fantasy RPG style music, right? So I released this, and it got me thinking that as a composer and musician, I'm usually brought on the tail end of projects to put some lipstick on the pig, and after all the decisions are already made, right? So I was inspired by Loot to sort of take a music-first approach to world building, which is what I've done. So the next step in this is that I'm essentially going to release a series of puzzle rooms, which are kind of escape rooms set on cyber galleries. So here's like a first pass, if you can see this. a lot of this is commissioned art. This is from the AI artist Inner Sanctum. But essentially, the gallery contains a bunch of puzzles that you can solve, and that's going to be sort of a game-like experience, sort of a light one, right? So that's the format. Now the story is about kind of the theft of the muses, songs, and everything like that. So essentially, I built this room, and I got to thinking about tickets for it, right? So that brings me to my latest collection, which is launching today, Loot, A Song of Paws and Whiskers. So this is an effort to fill the ancient Adruan countryside with all manner of cute, fuzzy creatures and animals to kind of be the lore of this world, of the natural world that goes into it. So each one of these, I'll zoom in, is sort of an AI art creation of my own, plus contains a bunch of intertwined lore that connects to the other objects in the collection. And the idea is going to be that if you want to check your answer to the puzzle room and help build the story, then you need to own one of these as sort of a collectible ticket that's going to unlock getting the correct answers from the puzzle room. So that's sort of the structure of these collections in a nutshell. I am a one-man show over here, so I'm sort of looking to build this creative world and then connect it deeply to the lore in the community. So oftentimes people start with like a map first when it comes to the creative. I haven't done that here because I'm intentionally trying to keep it open-ended to build on the stuff that Tim and folks are putting together. But that's sort of the world in a nutshell. I think I went through that way too fast. Any questions or comments or stuff I can show off some more here?
Yeah, could you go into oh, did I interrupt someone? Okay, I'm gonna go. Could you go into how the lore of how the songs connect into the whole loop verse and just talk about the music? I'm really interested.
Sure. So the idea was that these musical pieces are sort of building blocks, right? So as a film composer, often you're called to write kind of backgroundy music that fits a scene. These are not that. These are more melody-forward, sort of lyrical Final Fantasy style musical pieces. It's super awkward to demo music on a huge call, so I'm gonna point to the collection for Loot project here. It's Loot with a U for adventurers on OpenSea. You can go check it out. But essentially, each one of these is getting kind of a primal mood. So, for example, actually, why don't I try to play just a little bit of one here? Is this audible at all?
I can't really.
It's going in and out.
Yeah, cutting in and out.
Yeah, all right, that's a little awkward to do, so I'll skip that. But essentially, this one, Sunken Treasure, has kind of a pirate exploration theme. So part of the story of my Loot universe so far is about the songs of making getting stolen from the muses and dropped in a treasure chest under the sea, right? So that's this Sunken Treasure music theme connects to that part of the story, so it's sort of a way in which the music seeded the storyline. We've also got the songs of making here that the muses sing to keep the world in balance. So that's that's in and of itself a piece of music here. And then I'll leave this on in the background here, but I basically developed this whole set of concept art using AI to develop this kingdom of Adra and what the world looked like when it was in balance once upon a time. So let me embellish a little bit here too about the characters. So on one hand, we've got the muses, and then we've got Loot's villain, the charlatan, who essentially I don't want to give away too much of the story, but essentially one of the muses has a haunted musical instrument that summons a demon that is essentially a Kraken Genesis adventurer who summons a series of dream Kraken who corrupt the world and help him steal the songs. So that's part of the storyline connected with this. And the charlatan story is actually inspired by a real by real events. When I first started working with this, I found what I thought was a new artist on Twitter, and I bought a bunch of their stuff, and I thought I was helping discover someone new. And it turned out that the art had been stolen. So for me, like that making the charlatan / thief figure the villain in this was a way to connect to that real life rug pull and get some good out of it and some creative energy. So that's where this is coming from. And this video right here, these are the this is a mashup of various Adruan landscapes and concept art that I've done for the muses themselves and the different orders of loot as they are manifest in this world. So just trying to make the ideas from the contract and this contract-driven lore real, but approaching it from the creative side, right? As a composer artist, I can kind of get into specific characters and stories and approach it from the other side from the rest of the community. Any other comments or questions? I'd love to hear what people are thinking.
Oh, I love this. I love this one right here.
I just got a DM in the background says, "OMG, this is so solid. Is this going to be another amazing Fleeper loot project?" There you go.
I certainly hope so. I've got all this free-floating lore, and I'm doing this myself and hiring some artists to help. I would love to be connecting this deeply with as many of your projects as will take it. Like that's what really gets me going, is that idea of using these as creative building blocks and tying sort of this shared creative experience driven by the contract that everyone can get with. So I'm really looking to start forming some collaborations and getting more involved in the community.
Amazing. Bowtied, I remember, gosh, when did I jump on your first story call for this? It was like October or something?
Yeah, it was November or October of last year. Had just some building blocks, and it's really fun how the tiniest seed of why are songs missing from the loot contract, right? Can develop each storyline and turn into something really kind of interesting.
Well, it was you noticed, what was it in Lore C? Sorry, this is getting really deep into the contract, but Lore C, there are prefixes. For some reason, all of the musical type prefixes were lost. Right? And that kind of was the root of this idea. All the music, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but all the music related, none of them show up in the bags. They're all part of this lost lore. That's super cool.
Yeah, it was super convenient as a composer coming into it and seeing that the seed ideas could be about, all right, why is song, instrument, form, shadow, and growl, why are these missing, right? And it just sort of led to that story of demonic song theft, which I'm hoping has some wider implications.
This is so cool. Can you do a merge request onto Loot.Foundation? Maybe about the names, or maybe somewhere else you can figure out where to nest it. But I hadn't even seen this pattern emerge till you just said it. And if we're saying that that's true, that all the song-related words are in the lost lore, that's a true fact straight from the OG contract. And then we can level it up and bring it to life in the amazing vision you have here. But it's awesome to get it down on paper as hey, this is a fact from the contract, and then here's something we're going to go do with it.
Awesome. Tip, can I ask for some help doing that? I'm sort of on the creative side. I have to admit to being a little bit boomer tier when it comes to doing work requests or anything code related. So any that would be awesome.
No worries. It functions actually just like Google Docs or something. So no code needed. It's just you type what you want, make pages. Super straightforward. I'll send you the link and you can do it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much again for the chance to present. And those you can follow me on Twitter at Bowtied Indigo. And then I've got, again, that new collection, Luda's Song of Paws and Whiskers, with all these cute collectible animals. It just went up at midnight tonight. So if you're interested and you like cute, fuzzy things based on loot, I'd love to have the support, and I'm eager to connect with a lot of you and help build this world.
And for anyone listening on the YouTube or the podcast version of this, Loot Town Square, the intro and outro song was done by Bowtied Indigo. And actually, that was a commission. I commissioned Bowtied to make a song for my loot bag. This was in October, and we used some of that piece for the Town Square music.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for the chance to present. I'm looking forward to connecting with some of you on Twitter and elsewhere.
Yeah, this is great, Botan. This is amazing. For the pieces that you have listed, like I noticed you don't have any listed right now for sale, but I see some have been sold. So is it just like we can make offers on some of those songs if we like them, or how are you expecting that to work with the OpenSea collection?
Yeah, so in brutal honesty, like I love writing music and I'm gonna keep doing it anyway, and I love doing commissions. It costs me like $3,000 to $5,000 to put together an orchestral score and have it nicely recorded, and I just don't see people as being used to paying that much for music, right? As a one for one. But I'm happy to look into doing some commissions and helping out with some other projects instead. But I think for now NFTs are more advanced as a visual medium, which is why I was kind of going in this direction and leaving the music to help fill in that puzzle room experience instead of being the meat of it. But I'm definitely interested in contributing creatively with the music and pursuing commissions as well.
Great. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Boted.
Thank you.
All right. I think we're going to start wrapping up here. We're at an hour, 22 minutes. I was going to bring up some Loot DAO conversation and, have a conversation about the snapshot vote that just happened that didn't pass. But I think we should actually dedicate a maybe not a Loot Town Square, but a separate call for that conversation and just go deep on governance and the future of Loot and some of these ideas for delegates that kind of control like a multi-sig and control are voted in to make some decisions, a little more quicker decisions to kind of accelerate progress in the Lootverse. So I think we'll hold off on that for now, and I think pretty shortly we should organize a call just for that and just for conversation about that. I don't know, Tim Shaw, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd love a separate call for it. There's so much going on in the background, both in the Discord, but also in all the other Discords and in DM groups and IRL and elsewhere around how to steer Loot forward and grow Loot forward and build a stronger Lootverse. But we don't really have a Loot DAO yet. So I think building a Loot DAO is an exciting and amazing next step for Loot. Even though the quorum stuff didn't work, I think there's a ton of opportunity. And so I agree with you, Andrew. Let's do a whole dedicated call about that. Both about the Loot DAO concept, but also the Lootverse Advancement DAO. Both Loot as the foundation for builders, but also the Lootverse as this explosion of creative projects and music to art to games to more that's built in and around Loot. I think there's opportunity to really accelerate both at the same time. So TLDR, yes, let's do a dedicated call. Yeah,
we'll do a dedicated call, State of the Union, and maybe even put out an agenda beforehand so people can kind of prepare. But I would like that to be more of a conversation, debate, lots of active participation. And so we can all kind of push this thing forward together. Other than that, I don't have anything else today, unless anyone wants to share anything cool going on. I think we're going to end about an hour and a half.
So impressed with y'all.
Yep.
So much range across this ecosystem. It's incredible. Okay, crew. GM, GN.
Peace out.
Bye, everyone.
See you later.